Picture a high-tech empire in your mind right now. Just, really visualize it.
Right. You're probably seeing something very specific.
Exactly. You're visualizing pristine infrastructure. You're picturing, like, billions of dollars in government grants.
Oh, absolutely. Flawlessly paved roads leading to these massive glass campuses.
Yeah, and subterranean fiber optic cables laid down by some visionary public works project. And, a deeply wealthy local economy supporting all of it.
Because that's the recipe, right?
Right.
It's almost like this collective agreement we all have.
Right. You need a rich country to build a rich tech sector.
It is deeply comforting to think that innovation works that way, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. We naturally just assume it requires a very deliberate, highly funded, top-down blueprint.
Right. Like we want to believe an economic miracle can just be cleanly engineered, by a state planning committee.
Provided they spend enough tax dollars on the right buildings, right?
Exactly. The right buildings, the right subsidies, because it makes the world feel predictable.
But then, you step into the reality of the global software industry in the 1990s.
Oh, man, yeah.
And suddenly that entire predictable blueprint is completely torn to shreds. I mean, we are looking at a historical landscape today that shatters every single assumption you might have about how tech hubs are born.
It really does. It flips everything upside down.
So today's deep dive is going into the heart of India, a nation that, at the dawn of the 90s, had an incredibly low per capita GDP.
Extremely low. And notoriously bad public infrastructure.
Right. They were famously struggling to maintain even basic functional systems.
Yeah.
And yet, this same nation somehow pulled off one of the most astonishing, logic-defying tech miracles in modern economic history.
Which is putting it mildly.
I mean, we are talking about a country growing its software exports by an average of 30% a year.
Every single year.
Every year, for over a decade.
It is the absolute definition of an anti-common sense reality. When you look at the raw numbers, it honestly looks like a glitch in the global economy.
A total glitch.
But what is truly fascinating here, and what we are really going to tear apart today, is that the real story behind this rise has been buried.
Buried under decades of convenient political narrative.
Exactly. The things you think caused this boom, the things the politicians claim caused it, they are mostly a mirage.
And we are basing this entire deep dive on a truly groundbreaking piece of research to prove that.
Yeah, the data on this is incredible.
It's a massive, incredibly detailed 14-year data set. It spans from 1990 to 2003.
Right.
And it was meticulously gathered and analyzed by two researchers, Ashish Arora from Duke University and Surendra K. Bagde from Carnegie Mellon.
Two heavy hitters in the field.
Definitely. So our mission today is to cut through the noise. We want to bypass the press releases and uncover the raw, unvarnished mechanics behind this impossible rise.
Right. Because the reality we are going to explore today is a story of how a desperately poor government essentially just, they stepped back.
They got out of the way.
Exactly. And how a completely chaotic, unregulated explosion of human capital filled that void. It completely flips the script on what actually drives international trade.
So to really understand the secret here, we have to start by burning down the myths.
We have to.
We need to look at the sheer scale of the miracle first. In 1990, India's total software exports were sitting at a relatively meager $128 million.
Which is basically a cottage industry.
Yeah, a tiny drop in the bucket. But fast forward to 2003, that number had surged to $12.2 billion.
Just astronomical growth.
That is not normal. That is an entire sector of the economy entering hyperdrive. And naturally, when a sector explodes like that and generates billions of dollars in wealth, politicians are going to line up around the block to take credit.
Oh, success always has 1,000 fathers.
Right.
Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, state governments across India, along with the national media, pushed a very specific narrative.
What were they saying?
They pointed to what we can basically call the tech park lie.
The tech park lie. I like that framing. What exactly were they claiming with that?
Well, in the early 90s, the government created this software technology park scheme. Various states started setting up these dedicated IT parks.
Okay.
The idea was to create these walled gardens of perfection, right? Inside these parks, companies would get reliable physical infrastructure.
Right, the things they couldn't get outside.
Exactly. Guaranteed building space, uninterrupted electrical power, which, by the way, was a massive deal in a country plagued by rolling blackouts at the time.
Oh, I'm sure. You can't run servers if the power keeps cutting out.
And they offered high-speed internet connectivity. The government also offered single-window clearances just to, cut through the notorious Indian bureaucracy.
Which is famously dense.
Right. So the narrative became the state built these world-class physical incubators, provided the subsidies, and that is why the software industry blossomed.
I mean, it sounds incredibly plausible, though.
It does.
If I am running a tech company in 1995, I need electricity. I need phone lines to talk to my clients in New York. I need a building where the roof doesn't leak.
That's the baseline assumption.
Right. You cannot tell me that infrastructure didn't matter at all. Without computers and power, there is no code. The government had to have been the catalyst by providing those basic necessities.
That is exactly the common sense assumption that Arora and Bagde's data set totally dismantles.
Really?
Yeah. They didn't just look at government press releases. They looked at a comprehensive 1997 survey of the actual tech CEOs.
The people on the ground.
Right. The software firm leaders who were in the trenches of this boom. The researchers asked these leaders to rank the factors that were most critical to their business success and survival.
And I am guessing the beautiful new tech parks didn't exactly top the list.
They barely even registered.
Wow.
When these industry leaders were asked what mattered most, only 10% of them said that government support was a crucial factor.
10%.
And even more shockingly, only 12% cared about physical infrastructure. Think about that.
Wait, almost 90% of the people actually building this multi-billion-dollar industry looked at those heavily publicized government-funded tech parks and incubators and said, yeah, that's not really important to us.
Exactly. They were just shrugging it off.
I have to push back on that, though. That borders on the absurd. How do you run a global software export business and not care about physical infrastructure?
Well,
were they just coding on paper?
You have to understand what the Indian software export industry actually looked like in the early 90s. The vast majority of the work wasn't happening in those shiny new buildings in Bangalore or Mumbai.
Where was it happening?
It was happening in New Jersey, in London, in Silicon Valley.
Wait, the Indian software exports weren't happening in India?
Exactly. The dominant business model in the early days was something called body shopping.
Body shopping.
Yeah. An Indian firm would secure a contract with, say, an American bank or a European telecommunications company. But instead of doing the work remotely over slow, expensive satellite links, the Indian firm would just physically fly their software developers to the client's site.
Oh, so they went to America or Europe?
Right. The developers would sit at the client's desks, use the client's computers, run on the client's electricity, and eat in the client's cafeteria for 6 months to a year.
Ah, I see. So the infrastructure bottleneck in India didn't matter because they were just using American infrastructure.
Exactly.
The Indian firm wasn't exporting a physical product. They were essentially functioning as a highly specialized international temp agency.
Precisely. They were exporting human minds.
Wow.
Now, as the 90s progressed and international telecom links slowly got better and cheaper, the work did start shifting back to offshore development centers within India.
Right, that makes sense.
But even then, the physical office space was totally secondary to the real crisis these CEOs were facing.
Which brings us to the actual bottleneck.
What?
If they didn't care about the state-of-the-art buildings, what was keeping these CEOs awake at night in 1997?
A massive 57% of these firms named talent shortage as their absolute existential bottleneck.
57%.
And right behind that, 44% said they were bleeding out from employee attrition.
So they couldn't hire enough people, and the ones they did hire were leaving.
Right. Their entire business model relied on having an army of highly intelligent, English-speaking, adaptable workers. They simply could not find and keep enough skilled human beings to meet the exploding global demand.
It is like trying to run a massive high-stakes restaurant chain.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like, it honestly doesn't matter if you have a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar kitchen or if you are cooking on a dirt floor in an alleyway. If you don't have chefs, you cannot serve food.
Absolutely.
Software in the 1990s was pure, unadulterated human capital. The code does not write itself. You need the minds.
You need the minds.
If you have the minds, you can put them on a plane to Chicago, or you can cram them into a mediocre office building in Mumbai. The minds are the only constraint.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The only thing that mattered was the pipeline of high-quality engineers.
Yeah.
And that sets up the central mystery of this entire deep dive.
Right, because if human talent is the single defining variable for a multi-billion-dollar tech boom, we have a serious problem.
A huge problem.
How on earth did India, a nation that late 80s and early 90s, was actively struggling with widespread poverty, massive public debt, and just a suffocating bureaucracy, suddenly managed to train up a massive world-class tech army.
The sheer scale of the educational buildup is staggering. We aren't talking about a slow, steady increase in graduation rates here.
Yeah, no.
No, we are talking about a violent, unprecedented multiplication of educational capacity in a remarkably short window of time.
I am looking at the numbers from the dataset right now, and it really defies logic.
It does.
In 1985, the undergraduate engineering capacity in India, meaning the total number of seats available for students to study engineering across the entire country, was roughly 45,000.
Very small.
Yeah, it was an elite, highly restricted system. But by 2003, that capacity had multiplied by nearly 10. It hit roughly 440,000 seats.
To put that in perspective, the number of engineers they could produce per 1 million citizens skyrocketed from 59 to 405.
That's an insane jump.
They went from graduating a small town's worth of engineers every year to graduating a massive city's worth.
But hold on, let's look at the historical context for a second. The early 90s in India was not a time of flowing government coffers.
Oh, not at all.
They went through a massive balance of payments crisis in 1991. The state was literally flying its gold reserves to London just to secure emergency loans from the IMF.
Yeah, they were in dire straits.
The government was completely broke. So if the state and federal governments are facing a severe public finance dead end, how are they building hundreds of new engineering colleges?
Right, where's the money coming from?
Where's the money coming from to hire thousands of professors and buy thousands of acres of land for these new campuses?
What is truly remarkable here is that the government didn't build them.
Wait, what?
The state completely retreated from the arena.
Wait, if the government didn't build the colleges, who did?
Private capital.
Seriously?
Yeah, the data reveals an absolutely massive shift between 1995 and 2002. During the absolute fever pitch of this educational expansion, an astounding 94% of all new engineering colleges added in India were entirely private.
94%?
The public sector, the government, contributed a microscopic 6% of the new schools.
94% private. That is a total privatization of higher technical education overnight.
Completely overnight.
How does a government even allow that to happen? Especially a government that, for decades prior, was known for the licensed Raja system where the state strictly controlled almost every aspect of the economy and education.
Well, the underlying policy genius wasn't some massive, centrally planned government investment program. The genius was simply deregulation.
Just letting it happen.
Exactly. For decades, admission to engineering colleges was brutally rationed because the state couldn't afford to expand capacity.
But the demand was there.
Oh, there was this massive, latent, desperate demand from Indian families. They saw an engineering degree as the ultimate ticket to the middle class. Or better yet, a golden ticket to America.
Right. So the government, entirely out of money and unable to meet the demands of its own citizens, basically threw its hands up.
Pretty much.
They said, we can't afford to teach you, but if a private trust or a local businessman wants to build a school and charge you for it, go right ahead.
That's exactly what happened. They stepped out of the way and let the market dictate the term.
Oh.
Private capital flooded in. They started charging tuition and sometimes massive upfront capitation fees to desperate students and their families.
So the market provided the solution that the state just couldn't.
Yes. And as a result, the total number of engineering colleges skyrocketed from just 246 in the entire country in 1987 to over 1,100 by 2003.
It was a completely self-financed explosion of human capital.
Entirely self-financed.
It wasn't funded by tax dollars or IMF loans. It was funded by the life savings of thousands of Indian families making a highly calculated, high-stakes investment in their children's future.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
They saw the global software boom happening. They saw the salaries in Silicon Valley, and they willingly handed over their money to these new private colleges.
It was a raw, uncoordinated, fiercely capitalist response to a global demand shock.
Okay, so the private sector stepped up to the plate. The schools got built.
Yeah.
But as I look at the geographic data in Arora and Bagde's research, the map gets really weird.
The map is fascinating.
This revolution didn't happen evenly across the country. If this was just a free market response to global demand, you would expect colleges to pop up everywhere, from New Delhi to Calcutta.
Right. You'd expect a totally even spread.
We all know Bangalore became the household name, the famous Silicon Valley of India. But why Bangalore? Why were other regions in the north and east regions with massive populations and huge demand for jobs left completely in the dust?
That geographic bias is actually one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the entire study.
Really? How so?
It proves just how crucial local educational capacity was, and it highlights how long it takes to build a talent pipeline.
The imbalance is just stunning. If you look at the map of India in 1990, right before the software boom really takes off, just 4 states, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu.
Right.
All of them are in the south and west. Those 4 states held a massive 75% of the entire country's engineering capacity.
75%.
But if you look at their demographics, those 4 states only accounted for 29% of India's population.
They had essentially cornered the market on the exact resource the global software industry was about to become desperate for.
But why them? If this is all about private capital chasing tuition dollars, why didn't the politicians in the massive northern states like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar just open the floodgates and let private colleges build there too?
Because of the sheer inertia of bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy always gets in the way.
Always. If we trace this back, we have to look at a single, highly localized policy decision made decades before anyone had ever even heard of the internet, let alone software outsourcing.
Decades before.
Yeah, it is a genuine historical butterfly effect. Karnataka, which is the state where Bangalore is the capital, decided to allow private engineering colleges to operate way back in 1957.
1957?
Yep.
That is just 10 years after India gained independence from Britain. Computers basically took up entire rooms and ran on vacuum tubes back then. They certainly weren't thinking about offshore coding centers.
Not at all. It was likely driven by local political dynamics, regional demands for education, and early recognition that the state just couldn't fund everything.
Makes sense.
So while the vast majority of the country remained firmly locked into a socialist model of strictly state-funded education, Karnataka quietly permitted private engineering colleges to open their doors.
Just quietly doing their own thing.
Exactly. Over the next few decades, other southern and western states slowly observed this and followed suit. Andhra Pradesh allowed them in 1977. Maharashtra opened up in 1983. Tamil Nadu in 1984.
Meanwhile, what were the states in the north and east doing?
They held firmly to the state-controlled model. Many of them waited until the late 1980s or even late 1990s to finally deregulate and allow private technical education.
And that time delay is the whole ballgame.
It really is.
Because you can pass a law tomorrow saying private colleges are legal, but you can't magically summon a fully functioning college out of thin air.
No, it takes massive effort.
You have to buy land, construct buildings, design curriculums, and most importantly, you have to find hundreds of qualified professors to teach the students. That takes years, if not decades, to mature.
Exactly. By the time the software boom actually hit in the early 90s, Karnataka and its southern neighbors already had an untouchable, decades-long head start.
They were just waiting for the boom.
They had mature ecosystems, they had the colleges, they had the experienced faculty, they had the alumni networks, and they had the infrastructure to churn out thousands of graduates immediately.
So when these global tech firms, whether they were local startups or foreign multinationals like Texas Instruments, looked at the map of India in 1992.
They didn't care about what the central government wanted.
Right. They didn't care about where the politicians wanted them to go. They didn't care about political equity across regions. They went exactly where the engineers already were.
They followed the talent.
That completely localized, somewhat obscure 1957 policy decision in Karnataka literally dictated the winners and losers of the 2003 global tech economy.
It is incredible to think about. The winners of the global outsourcing wars were chosen by local bureaucrats 40 years before the game even started.
It is completely mind-blowing. Okay, so we have established this massive, geographically concentrated army of engineers in the South and West.
Yeah.
But here is where I have to raise a huge red flag based on what we see in the sources. We keep using the word engineers. We call them a tech army.
Right.
And naturally, anyone listening to this assumes these kids are all sitting in computer labs, hacking away in C++ and Java, studying data structures and algorithms.
That's the logical assumption.
But were they actually studying code?
This brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive, genuinely anti-common sense finding of the entire deep dive.
I am ready for it.
You would naturally think a multi-billion-dollar software revolution would be built almost exclusively by computer science graduates.
Of course.
But that wasn't the case at all.
The numbers from that 1997 survey we mentioned earlier are just baffling.
They really are.
It showed that 80% of the software workers in these top firms had engineering degrees. Okay, that sounds normal.
Sure.
But many of them weren't electrical engineers. They weren't computer science majors. They were civil engineers. They were chemical engineers.
And it gets weirder.
Some of them were literally studying textile engineering.
Imagine being an executive at a multinational bank. You need someone to write the back-end database that handles millions of financial transactions.
Lie stick stuff.
Right. And the offshore firm sends you a guy whose 4-year degree is fundamentally about the tensile strength of cotton and how to optimize industrial weaving looms.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd on its face.
It sounds like a joke.
I have to stop you because I'm putting myself in the shoes of a tech CEO in 1997. If I am running a software firm and a resume comes across my desk for a textile engineer, I am throwing that resume straight into the trash. I need someone who knows how to code, not someone who knows how to make a sweater. Why on earth are they hiring these people?
It makes zero sense if you view education purely as skill acquisition. But it makes perfect sense when you view education through the lens of something economists call filter theory.
Filter theory?
Yes, this concept was heavily explored by the Nobel laureate Michael Spence.
Okay, walk me through filter theory without making it sound like an economics lecture. How does a textile engineer end up writing a banking database?
You have to understand the nature of the software work being done in the 90s. A massive portion of this work, especially leading up to the year 2000, was Y2K remediation.
The Y2K bug.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't remember, older computer systems represented the year with only 2 digits, like 98 for 1998.
Yeah.
The fear was that when the year hit 2000, the computers would read 00 as 1900, and the entire global financial system would just crash.
Exactly. Now, fixing the Y2K bug did not require algorithmic genius. It did not require you to invent a new programming language.
It was basically digital janitor work.
Pretty much. It required someone to sit in front of a glowing monitor for 14 hours a day, combing through millions of lines of legacy code, finding 2-digit dates, and changing them to 4-digit dates.
That's thrilling.
It was incredibly tedious, grueling, mind-numbing work. And on top of that, the specific technology was changing so fast anyway that whatever coding language you learned in college would likely be obsolete in a few years regardless.
So the tech firms didn't actually need coding prodigies. They didn't care if you knew the deep theory of computer science.
No, they really didn't. What they desperately needed were human beings who were fundamentally brilliant, highly adaptable, structurally logical.
Okay.
And above all, capable of enduring immense academic and professional pressure without breaking.
And that is where the engineering degree comes in. Because getting into any engineering college in India, even a newly minted private one teaching civil or textile engineering, was an absolute bloodbath of competition.
It was a nationwide obstacle course. You had millions of high school students studying 16 hours a day, taking these grueling state and national entrance exams.
The pressure must have been insane.
It was. The sheer mathematical reality of the population meant that whoever managed to score high enough to claim one of those 440,000 seats was, by definition, in the upper echelon of cognitive ability and work ethic.
So the degree was a diploma disguise.
Exactly, a diploma disguise.
The companies weren't hiring the student for what they learned about textiles. The degree was a pure signaling mechanism.
A giant neon sign.
It was the student holding up a piece of paper that loudly signaled to employers, I am incredibly smart. I possess structured problem-solving skills. And most importantly, I have the sheer endurance to survive 4 years of grinding high-stress academic pressure.
It is a brilliant filtering mechanism. The tech firms just let the college entrance exams do all the hard work of finding the smartest, most resilient kids in a country of 1 billion people.
It is exactly like a bouncer at an insanely exclusive high-end nightclub.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You see people waiting in line outside for hours in the freezing cold. The bouncer at the door doesn't care if you actually know how to dance.
Right.
He doesn't care if you even like the music playing inside. He just cares that you had the endurance, the social status, and the sheer willpower to survive that massive, brutal line out front.
Exactly.
The engineering degree was the bouncer's stamp of approval. Once you got inside the club, once you got hired by the tech firm, they would teach you how to dance.
That's spot on.
They would put you through an internal training program to teach you the specific software tools they needed you to use.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The degree proved you could survive the line. But there is an even larger, entirely geopolitical reason why that specific 4-year degree was so critical, regardless of the major.
Right, because my next question would be, if you just need smart people and you are going to teach them how to code on the job anyway, why force them through 4 years of studying thermodynamics and cotton tensile strength?
It seems like a huge waste of time.
Why not just set up a brutal 3-month coding boot camp, find the geniuses, test their IQ, teach them Java in 90 days, and put them to work? It would save everyone 4 years of time and money.
It would be infinitely more efficient.
Right.
But it was entirely impossible because of the United States government.
Wait, what does Washington, D.C. have to do with the curriculum in a private college in Bangalore?
Well, we mentioned earlier that in the initial stages of the boom, the dominant business model was body shopping, right?
Yeah, sending Indian workers to client sites in America.
Exactly. To physically put an Indian citizen at a desk in New York or Silicon Valley, that worker needed a U.S. work visa, specifically the H-1B visa, which is designed for quote-unquote specialty occupations.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And U.S. immigration law, and the bureaucratic checklists used by consular officers evaluating these applications heavily favored applicants with formal 4-year undergraduate degrees.
So they wouldn't accept anything less.
The bureaucratic definition of a specialty occupation practically demanded traditional academic credentials.
Wow. Are you telling me you literally could not get your brightest talent into Silicon Valley without that specific piece of paper, regardless of their actual coding ability?
Precisely. If you took a 19-year-old coding prodigy who went to a 3-month boot camp and you sent through the U.S. Embassy in Chennai to get an H-1B visa, the consular officer would look at the lack of a 4-year degree and stamp rejected on the application.
Even if he was the best coder in the world.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But a 22-year-old textile engineer who just learned to code 3 weeks ago,
Oh, man.
the consular officer sees a 4-year Bachelor of Engineering degree. Check. Approved.
That is just, it is staggering to think about how interconnected the global economy is. A U.S. immigration policy, written by politicians in Washington, D.C. to regulate specialty labor, literally dictated the educational model of an entire nation on the other side of the planet.
It really did.
They couldn't use efficient boot camps because the American border guards wouldn't recognize them. So millions of Indian students spent 4 years studying irrelevant engineering fields just to get the visa master key.
It perfectly illustrates how an industry adapts to artificial constraints. They needed the visa required the degree, so they bought the degree regardless of the subject matter.
All right, this is a fascinating narrative. We have a 1957 local policy in Karnataka creating the schools and a U.S. visa requirement in Washington, D.C. creating the demand for 4-year degrees.
A perfect storm.
But at this point in the deep dive, I have to step in and play devil's advocate because anyone listening to this right now, especially anyone with a background in statistics or economics, is going to be screaming at their device.
Oh, they definitely should be. We are making massive claims about causality based on historical observation.
Right. A skeptic is going to look at this and say, wait a minute, you were just pointing at a map and a timeline. Sure, the southern and western states built more private colleges, and they exported more software.
That's the correlation.
But maybe those states were just richer in general. Maybe they had a better industrial base, more factories, better roads, or wealthier citizens who could afford computers.
Which is a very fair point.
Of course, rich states build more schools, and even export more software. It's just general wealth.
So how do we actually know scientifically that the colleges caused the software boom and not just underlying economic prosperity?
That is the exact critical question the researchers Arora and Bagde had to answer. In economics, there is a golden rule. Correlation is not causation.
Right.
Just because two trends grow together on a graph doesn't mean one caused the other. The fact that ice cream sales and shark attacks both go up in July doesn't mean ice cream summons sharks.
Right. It just means it's summer. Exactly. So to prove their theory, the researchers had to do some incredibly rigorous data sleuthing to isolate the true standalone effect of these engineering colleges.
How do you even do that in the real world? It's not a chemistry lab where you can perfectly control the environment. How do you kill the interference from all those other factors?
You use multiple regression analysis to rigorously factor out the noise. They built a statistical model that controlled for a massive array of alternative explanations.
Like what?
They gathered data on every state's gross domestic product. They factored in their population size, They controlled for general industrial output.
Okay, so getting rid of the general wealth argument.
Right. They even looked at telecom density, literally counting the number of telephone lines per 100 people in each state, and the size of the existing electronics manufacturing sector.
So they essentially leveled the playing field mathematically. They said, let's compare a poor state with a lot of colleges to a rich state with a lot of colleges and see what happens.
Precisely.
And what happened when they stripped all of that other noise away?
The results were stark. They found that telecom density, general industrial wealth, and per capita income had almost zero explanatory power when it came to software export growth.
Wait, telecom density didn't matter? Having more phone lines didn't predict software exports?
Not statistically, no.
That's wild.
The only variable that consistently aggressively predicted a state's software export growth was its engineering baccalaureate capacity.
The human capital.
Even after completely controlling for how rich, large, or industrialized the state was, the human capital factor remained absolutely dominant. It was the undeniable engine.
Okay, that is strong evidence, but there is still one more massive logical trap here.
Let's hear it.
The ultimate chicken or the egg dilemma. You were saying the colleges caused the software boom, but what if the software boom caused the colleges?
Reverse causality.
Think about it. If I'm a wealthy private investor in Bangalore in 1995, and I see local software companies making absolute billions of dollars, of course I'm going to lobby the government and open a private engineering college.
You'd be crazy not to.
I want to cash in on the demand. So the colleges aren't creating the boom. They are just a symptom of it.
You have just described the nightmare of every data scientist. If the growth of the software industry is feeding back into the creation of the colleges, then your initial data is horribly biased.
Right.
You are overestimating the power of the colleges because they're just reacting to the local tech boom, not causing it. You are caught in an endless feedback loop.
Exactly. So how did Arora and Bagde solve the chicken or the egg problem? Because if they didn't solve it, this entire theory kind of falls apart.
They solved it using what I think is a stroke of absolute statistical genius.
Really, how?
To break that feedback loop, they realized they couldn't just look at a state's own policies. They had to look outside the state's borders. They used a technique that relies on an external trigger, which we can call the neighbor's shadow trick.
The neighbor's shadow. I love this. Walk me through exactly how this works. Give me an example.
Okay, let's use a hypothetical based on the real geography.
Yeah.
Let's say you are looking at state A, which we will call Maharashtra. You know that Maharashtra's politicians and investors might be reacting to their own local software boom by approving more colleges. So you cannot trust Maharashtra's college growth timeline as an independent, unbiased variable.
Right, because they are tainted by their own success.
Exactly. But what about state B, right next door? Let's call them Gujarat. Now, the politicians in Gujarat do not care about the software export numbers in Maharashtra.
No, why would they?
They are completely independent. They run their own state. But if Gujarat suddenly passes a high-profile law allowing private engineering colleges to open, it creates a massive political and competitive ripple effect across the border.
Because suddenly, the citizens and investors in Maharashtra see what's happening right next door in Gujarat.
Exactly.
They see students crossing the border to pay tuition. They see money leaving the state. And they pressure their own government to do the same thing.
Precisely. The researchers looked at the neighboring state's policies. A neighboring state legalizing private colleges fundamentally alters your local educational landscape by creating competitive pressure.
That makes total sense.
But, and this is the crucial part, that neighboring state is changing its laws completely independently of your local software export numbers.
It perfectly breaks the chicken and egg loop. You use the neighbor's policy change as the trigger to measure the true effect. That is just beautiful data detective work.
It really is.
And what was the big reveal? When they finally used the neighbor's shadow trick to isolate the pure data, did the colleges still matter?
They didn't just matter. The results were explosive.
Really?
By using this brilliant statistical trick, the researchers found that the actual causal impact of engineering capacity on software exports didn't just hold up. It was actually 3 times larger than the basic math originally showed.
3 times larger?
Yes, the basic flawed math showed an impact coefficient of 0.20. But when they used the clean, isolated neighbor's shadow regression, the coefficient jumped to 0.74.
Wow. So the initial data was actually underestimating how vital these private colleges were.
Hugely underestimating.
All the measurement errors, the chaotic nature of the market, the background noise, It was hiding the true magnitude of the effect. When you finally isolate the true signal, the colleges were driving the boom 3 times harder than anyone thought.
It is the ultimate vindication of the human capital theory. The infrastructure didn't build the industry. The colleges were the absolute, undeniable engine of the entire phenomenon.
Okay, the math is bulletproof. We know the schools caused the boom. The data proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yes, it does.
But I want to get physical for a second. I want to talk about the actual humans involved.
Okay, let's bring it back to the people.
We have all these local graduates in the 90s getting their degrees. How did these young kids, fresh out of a private textile engineering college in Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu, physically trigger billions of dollars in international trade?
It's a massive leap.
It is.
Yeah.
How do you go from a crowded classroom in a developing country to securing a multi-million-dollar software contract with a Fortune 500 company in New York?
That brings us to a crucial concept, the Silicon Bridge.
The Silicon Bridge.
Remember those thousands of engineers who graduated in the 80s and early 90s? The ones who went through the brutal diploma disguise filter and grabbed those H-1B visas.
Right, the ones who were part of the initial body shopping wave. Where did they end up?
Well, they didn't just do their 6-month stint and go home. Many of them stayed.
Oh, they permanently relocated.
Yes, they became the foundation of the Silicon Valley diaspora. They crossed the ocean. They integrated deeply into the American tech ecosystem.
They built roots there.
And they built stellar reputations for hard work and brilliance. Over the course of a decade, they rose to positions of immense influence within major U.S. corporations.
So they were climbing the corporate ladder.
Exactly. They became the CTOs, the project managers, the VPs of engineering at major banks and tech firms.
And then from their offices in California or New York, they looked back home.
Exactly. It created a beautiful, highly lucrative symmetry. The talent flowed to the U.S. on those visas, but those individuals didn't sever their ties.
They kept their connections.
They acted as human bridges. When their American employers realized they needed massive, tedious coding projects done, like Y2K remediation, and they needed it done cheaply and efficiently, this diaspora network raised their hands.
They already knew who to call.
Right. They said, I know exactly who can do this. I know the colleges they graduate from. I know the quality of the firms back in my home state because I used to work there.
It is a network of immense trust. An American executive might be hesitant to hand over their core banking database to a random firm in Bangalore.
Naturally.
But if their trusted VP of engineering, who has worked alongside them for 5 years, personally vouches for that firm, the deal gets signed.
Exactly. They funneled massive outsourcing contracts back to the exact regions that had produced them in the first place.
So it's a completely closed loop.
It's a two-way street. The bodies go west and the money comes east.
And it wasn't just about routing contracts to existing legacy firms, right? The data shows this massive reservoir of educated talent mutated into something else entirely.
Oh, it triggered an entrepreneurial explosion. The research highlights a stunning figure.
What's the number?
By 2001, over a third of the entire Indian software industry's revenue and employment was driven by entrepreneurial startup firms, not just the giant legacy companies like Tata Consultancy Services.
And let me guess who was founding the startups. It wasn't foreign investors flying in to build companies.
Almost all of them were local kids with these exact engineering backgrounds.
That's incredible.
A huge fraction of these startups were founded by people who had been trained in this system. Perhaps they worked for a larger firm for a few years, or maybe they went to the U.S., saved up some capital, built their network, and then spun off to create their own companies back home.
So the education system didn't just produce compliant workers.
No, it generated a hotbed of founders who continuously reinvented and expanded the industry.
Wait, hold on. I need to stop you right there.
Oh.
The story's getting a little too perfect. It sounds like a capitalist fairy tale.
That does sound pretty rosy.
The government is broke, so the heroic private sector steps in. The kids get educated, they go to America, they send billions of dollars back home, they start their own companies, and everyone gets rich. What is the catch here?
You're right to be skeptical.
You cannot take an educational system, scale it violently by 10x in a single decade, relying entirely on private money, without a massive dark side.
You are absolutely right to be suspicious. And to their credit, Arora and Bagde do not shy away from the massive hidden costs of this savage expansion.
Okay, good. So what's the catch?
When you privatize an entire nation's technical education system overnight, and you turn it into a volume-driven assembly line designed purely to feed entry-level workers to the global market, the academic pyramid collapses.
What do you mean by the academic pyramid collapsing?
Think about what a healthy, sustainable educational ecosystem looks like.
Hmm.
At the broad base, you have a massive number of undergraduates learning the fundamentals.
Right.
Above them, a smaller layer of master's students specializing. And at the very top, the pinnacle of the pyramid, you have the PhDs.
The researchers.
Yes, the doctoral candidates and professors doing deep, fundamental, groundbreaking research.
Right. The people inventing the next generation of microchips, creating new programming languages, and pushing the boundaries of physics, not just fixing two-digit bait codes on a legacy banking website.
Exactly. But while the undergraduate capacity in India was multiplying by 10 to feed the immediate, insatiable demands of the software export market, the production of PhDs suffered a catastrophic collapse.
How bad was it?
The data is incredibly grim. The number of engineering PhDs produced in India plummeted from 629 in 1991 to just 298 by 1996.
Wait, it got cut in half.
More than half.
During the biggest technological boom in the country's history, the number of people actually researching technology dropped by 50%.
Yes, because private self-financed colleges have zero financial incentive to fund expensive, long-term PhD research programs.
Well, yeah, there's no money in that.
Their entire business model is built on charging tuition to churn out employable undergraduates as fast as possible. You don't make a profit spending 5 years funding a PhD candidate to study theoretical quantum computing.
Right.
You make a profit cramming 100 kids into a classroom to learn basic Java. The country essentially traded deep fundamental research for an incredibly lucrative assembly line of basic workers.
That is a massive generational trade-off. They sacrificed the future to cash in on the present.
They absolutely did.
And what about the quality of those undergraduates? If you are throwing open the doors to hundreds of new, loosely regulated private colleges just chasing tuition money, the graduates can't all be top tier.
Not even close.
Especially if they aren't producing PhDs to become the next generation of professors. Who is teaching these kids? So they were churning out massive volume, but were the graduates actually any good?
That is the second major consequence, and it reveals the massive hidden tax of a purely privatized system.
The hidden tax.
Yeah, the quality of education at many of these new pop-up colleges was notoriously poor. They lacked qualified faculty, they lacked adequate computer labs, and they were essentially diploma mills.
So they were just handing out papers.
The graduates were often incredibly raw.
So what did the software firms do? They just fought a brutal war to hire these kids, and then the kids arrive at the office on day one and don't even know how to write a basic script.
Exactly. The leading tech firms, companies like Infosys and Wipro, were forced to step in and literally become what we can call a second university.
A second university.
They couldn't rely on the colleges to teach practical skills, so they had to build massive, sprawling residential training campuses of their own.
Oh, wow.
They were forced to spend massive amounts of their own corporate capital to retrain these fresh graduates for months before they could even be put on a single billable project.
How much money are we talking about?
The data shows that top firms were spending 3 to 4% of their total revenue just on internal retraining programs.
3 to 4% of top-line revenue. For a multi-billion-dollar firm, that is hundreds of millions of dollars.
Huge amounts of money.
That is money siphoned directly away from R&D, away from global expansion, just to teach these kids what the private colleges were supposed to teach them in the first place.
It points to the profound limit of privatization. When the government abandons public investment entirely and leaves education strictly to market forces, the market solves the volume problem brilliantly.
It gets bodies and seats.
Exactly. But it fails utterly at the quality and research problems. Eventually, the corporate sector is forced to foot the bill to fix the product the market produced.
Wow. Okay, I need to take a breath. Let's summarize this wild journey for everyone listening, because we have covered incredible ground today.
We really have.
We're started by completely busting the myth of infrastructure. The shiny tech parks, the state-of-the-art buildings, the government subsidies, they were largely a sideshow.
A total mirage.
The real engine of the Indian software miracle was a desperate, insatiable need for human capital. And when a government, crippled by a financial crisis, had to step back, private capital flooded the zone, multiplying educational capacity tenfold.
Driven by sheer market demand.
But the true secret sauce was an entirely unpredictable geographic quirk. A 1957 policy decision in Karnataka that gave the South and West an untouchable 40-year head start.
The butterfly effect in action.
Add in the bizarre reality of textile engineers using their grueling degrees as a diploma disguise to satisfy the strict bureaucratic checklists of U.S. H-1B visa laws, and you have the perfect storm.
And that created the bridge.
Right. The Silicon Bridge was built, sending talent west and routing massive contracts east, mutating into a multi-billion-dollar empire fueled by sheer entrepreneurial force.
It is a phenomenal story of adaptation. It shows how human ambition and market dynamics can route around immense constraints, whether those constraints are crumbling infrastructure or rigid visa laws. But as we discussed, it came at the steep price of deep research and long-term educational quality.
Which brings us to the final and frankly chilling question we have to leave you with today. We are sitting here in 2026.
Yes, we are.
This completely deregulated, privatized model of mass-producing entry-level coders worked brilliantly for the outsourcing wars of the 90s and early 2000s. It built an empire.
It did. But look around today. We are living in the age of artificial intelligence.
A completely different world.
We're in an era where an AI model can handle rote, repetitive coding, the exact kind of tedious Y2K-style work those early textile engineers were doing in a matter of seconds.
Right. The world simply doesn't need a massive army of basic coders anymore. The future of technology belongs to deep, fundamental research.
Which requires heavy academic lifting.
It belongs to the people building the AI models, creating entirely new computing architectures, pushing the theoretical boundaries of what computing can even do.
Which is the exact thing this privatized system decimated when the PhD pipeline collapsed in the 1990s.
So, as you think about how empires are built and how they fall, the question you have to ask yourself is this. Is the very formula that built India's impossible tech miracle mass volume over deep research about to become its greatest vulnerability in the age of AI?
That is the million-dollar question.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the surface-level narratives you see in the news, keep digging into the raw data, and we will see you next time.